Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We are, at the moment, back on schedule, believe it or not. As I said, start on time, end on time. Whatever happens in between, we can deal with. This session will go shorter than scheduled, unless you have a lot of questions, which is what we want during this session. Please ask questions. There are 3 ways to do it. You can raise your hand. You can email mologgers@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at mologgers, # 2014 annual meeting, and you can ask questions that way if you don't feel comfortable standing up in front of the group and asking questions. But we want a lot of questions. We originally had 3 panel members for this session. We're down to 2 because the other one had a family emergency. So we'll go through the questions, but hopefully it's very interactive. So with me today, I have Bill Johnson. He's the Director of Administration for the City of Fulton. And I also have Rodney Bourne, who's the General Manager of Rolla Municipal Utilities in Rolla, Missouri. And both of these guys have done some interesting things with their loggers benefits and their loggers funding over the last few years. And I thought it'd be really interesting to bring them in and ask them some questions about that, because it may be what they've done with their loggers benefits may be beneficial to the larger group. All right? So I'm going to start with Bill, and I'm going to just ask him some questions about what they've done. So January 1st of 2014, the City of Fulton made some pretty dramatic changes with its retirement benefits for its employees. Can you describe those changes to us and what exactly took place there?
Well, it started a long time ago. I started with Fulton in '96. Just after I started, they went from the 1.25% to the 1.5% on loggers. But then about a year or 2 after that, we were experiencing a lot of turnover. And the City Council wanted me to investigate ways to fix the turnover and reduce that a little bit. And we identified the retirement plan as being one item that we could look at. Because basically Columbia, Jeff City, and Mexico were all competing for the same employees. And they were already at the 2% level. So we contacted you guys like we do every year, whether we want to or not. And we had you run what it would cost us to go to the 2%. And it was going to be about $500,000 additional a year. And we determined that was unaffordable. But we still wanted to do something to help out the employees in the retirement. So we decided to do a 401 plan, a defined contribution plan, rather than in addition to the loggers' defined benefit plan. So in the year 2000, we set it up and got it going. And some of the rules we had was after 1 year of service, we would match up to 3% of the employee's salary. And after 5 years of service, we would match up to 5% of the employee's salary. It didn't catch on very quick at all. For the first several years, we were well less than 50% participation of those eligible. But then in about 2008 or 2009, participation really picked up. And so we kind of started getting excited and the intent was, once the cost to the city of funding the match for the 401 exceeded the additional cost for us to go to the 2% on the loggers, we were going to kill the match. And we would use the money that we were putting into the match to fund the difference. And the thought process was, it would not be a major hit all at once. Going from 1.5 to 2, we would go from 1.5 with some matching deferred, and then we would have the funds available to do the 2. And as it turned out, in 2013, we reached that level. It was costing us about $176,000 a year to fund the match. And after we called them and found out it was going to cost us another $140,000 to go to the 2%, on top of what we were already paying for the 1.5. Anyway, the bottom line was it was going to be a direct savings to the city of $36,000 a year. But to get to the 2% level, we also had to do we also went to the contributory, where each of the employees has to pay 4% of their salary to be in loggers. And the kind of the difference between the 401 and the loggers, the 401 was totally optional, and the loggers was not. When we kind of made this switch, we had some people that say that even the 401 was better because only those employees that participated got the benefit. So only those employees that wanted to benefit themselves would get the benefit. But the city council saw it differently. They wanted to make sure that every employee was taken care of and had an adequate, well-funded lifetime benefit. So it was actually a pretty easy sell to the council. So Michelle, where are you at? Over there. My HR director, the CFO, and I, we made some presentations to the mayor. And every time the mayor would ask a question, Michelle would get up and leave, go back to her office, come back in about half an hour with new numbers. But the mayor thought it was a great idea. We took it to the council. The council evaluated it. And then, like I said, there's a 45-day process that we have to have a public hearing and go into that detail. And during that 45 days, we asked a rep from loggers to come up and do presentations to our city employees. And we had at the time we had about 175, let's just call it that, employees full time. And we had over half the employees attend the meetings. One interesting fact that I kind of came up because of this is, of the 175 employees we had, 100 to the number were over 40, and many of them had been with us a number of years. So Michelle handed out some things we gave all the employees, an Excel spreadsheet that we gave all the employees that kind of shows what your benefit at various years would be at 1.5%, what your benefit would be at 2%. And then if you look on the back, it actually has just what the difference is. If you go straight to the back, it's just what the difference is. The older employees were just, why are you being so nice to us to do this? It was, we're not used to that. They were very glad and willing to give up their 3 or 5% match. I got some stats in. We had 75% of the eligible employees to participate in the 401 at the end of 13 were participating. 94% of the people that were participating at 3% or greater.
Wow.
But then with the going contributory, we were going to turn around and take 4% out of their paycheck for the loggers' contribution. They could use that 3% to offset some of that 4 that we're going to give the loggers. And then just the council, because they really thought this was a great deal, at the last minute they said, well, let's just give everybody a 5% raise too. So they wanted to cover that 4%. And if I'd have known that, I'd have said, well, let's just make it non-contributory.
Well, sure.
But we'd already gone down that whole path of it's going to be contributory. We thought the raise was going to be like 2%. And then they switched it up on us and said, let's just go 5 if we can afford it. And we can always find money for a raise. And so that was my question is you mentioned the older, more experienced employees were obviously, where do I sign? I'd be happy to give up 4% of my pay for a higher loggers benefit. It's the younger employees that it's a hard sell. Because they were investing their money in the 401 and playing the market and doing the funds, and they just kind of thought that they could do better on their own than they could in loggers. I mean, one guy even said, well, last year I made 13% and I did this last year. And I said, well, that was a good year. What if you would have had money in there in 2008, what would you have done? Like minus 50%? Mm-hmm. Been there.
Yeah.
But with loggers, you're not going to lose. And we have a 5-year vesting. We had it in the 401 and we have it in the loggers. So even though we're contributory now in loggers, if the employee leaves before he gets the 5 years vested in both the 401 and loggers, the employee can get all their money back. But with the 401, if the market's not doing well, the employee's not going to may not get back all the money they put in. But with loggers, they will get back all the money they've put in.
And did you have I hear this a lot from employers, is they'll actually poll the employees. Did you do a survey amongst the employees?
No, we talked about it. I'm going to go back about 25 years when I was in Marceline. The city council, based on the same thing, it was going to cost 8% of the salary increase to go to the next higher level on loggers, or it was going to be 4% raise to the employee. And in Marceline, I had 27 employees. We gave everybody a vote, and the vote was like 22-5 that they wanted to raise over the increase in the retirement benefit. And I asked one, I'm going to tell you exactly what he said. I said, "Why did you do that?" His answer was, "I want the money for beer on Saturday night." So he got his money for beer on Saturday night.
Right, right. Well, that seems like a legitimate concern for all of us. And no, I think that's good. And you actually talk from experience. But I talk to a lot of employers when they're looking at doing something.
I remember the employee's name. I remember where we were standing. It was like, oh, dang.
Well, and they asked me, do you think we should poll the employees? And I said, I'll save you the trouble. I'll tell you exactly how it's going to go down. The experienced employees are going to say, heck yeah, I'll pay 4% to get the L6 program. And the younger employees are going to say, no, I want the money now. So there, I just saved you the trouble of doing the survey. And that's...
Maybe you won't like the answer, because you won't like the answer.
Right.
If you're looking for the employees to say, oh yeah, we want to do this contributory and we want to do this, they're not going to want to do it.
So then why did you and why did the council and why did the city feel it was in the employee's best interest to be contributory and contribute to loggers and have a higher benefit program than just to continue to contribute to the 457, the 401?
Because of the number of employees that weren't participating in the 401. They saw this group of younger employees that weren't even, when you're matching 3% dollar for dollar, and they weren't taking advantage of it.
Free money.
It really caused some of the councilmen concern that they weren't taking advantage of a benefit that's being handed them. And they said, well, heck with that. We're going to give them a quality, a guaranteed lifetime benefit. And so with the city council, it was a pretty easy sell too.
And so you talked about just the dollar amount savings to the city's budget, but what are the other advantages to the city by making these changes? Are there any? Was it strictly just we're saving $32,000 a year on the budget, or are there other considerations as well?
I don't know. I hadn't thought of that one.
Okay. Well, no, it's just that's fine too. We're saving $32,000.
Michelle, got any answers for that?
Recruitment.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. So it's made recruitment better that you have the L6 because, like Bill said, you're competing with Columbia, who has the L6. Jeff City has the L6, and who else did you say?
Mexico.
And City of Mexico has the L6.
Just go with it.
Yeah. Okay. I think they do. I think they have L6 contributory as well. So that's good. So it helps you recruit quality employees, and it helps retain those employees as well once you hire them.
I think I will say I really think it helps with retainage.
Really?
I mean, it's the day that the logger statements come, everybody's looking at them and talking about them, and
good.
Just feeling pretty good about them.
Good. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Bill at this point?
And I think on the match, I think that's a trend out there that even, and not just whether it's 403, but my wife has a 401k plan at her work, and the employer there offers a tremendous match. I mean, it's not even a match. I mean, you put in, I think it's 2%, they'll give you 6%. And they still have a very low participation rate because they're not thinking that long-term goal, retirement. A lot of them are 26. Well, I need to eat today. I'm not worried about what I'm going to eat when I'm 65 or when I'm retired. And that's a very sad trend in our retirement planning. And you saw that on the stats, some of the stats earlier. I mean, it's very low savings rate, and people aren't preparing. So this is a good way to do it.
And I wish we would have had our mics on before the session started, because these two gentlemen were talking about what they've done with their plans. It was really interesting. And Rodney pointed out that they went to the L6 as well in 2008.
Yeah, we went, that's part of what I'm going to talk about, some of the after effects, but we went to the L6 in '08, and we'd moved from the LT865. And that was a several-year process as well. And I wasn't the manager at the time, but it involved a little bit in it. But when we made that change, the trade-off for us making that change was any new employees we hired after that date, we lost the rule of 80. And so it was a bargaining, it was a bargaining chip or a trade-off in order to get the better benefit package, giving up something else. Now, we didn't have to have a vote or anything, because all the current employees got to keep the keep the rule of 80. It was just new hires that wouldn't have it. Mm-hmm. And so for the regular employees, I think they thought that was a pretty good deal. But it allowed us to make that change.
And I think, we're seeing is that every loggers member wants the L6, right? But what we're learning from these two gentlemen is it seems as though you have to be willing to give up something else in order to get it.
Either give up something else, or like Bill had, it's have maybe an intermediate plan, which is let's work toward that contribution, because it does cost additional premium or contribution percentage going forward. It also, it's got the look back. If you've got your average age of your employees are 47 and they got 20 years of experience, there's also look back, because you've got to fund all that back pay it's not really back pay, but you've got to come up in previous years you've got to fund that. So there's kind of two aspects there, and you need to prepare for that.
So why, you've both mentioned that we had an investment type program, and the employees just weren't really participating in it. They weren't, and your wife is the same way. But why, from an employer standpoint, did you feel the need to intervene in the employees' retirement preparedness, retirement readiness? Why not just continue doing what you're doing, and if they're not saving enough, well, that's not my problem. Why, from an employer standpoint, did you decide, okay, we need to step in and create more retirement readiness for our employees? Bill?
I think the city council looked at it as part of some employees were getting a benefit merely because they chose to take it that other employees weren't. They looked at it almost as a fairness issue. I was participating, so I was getting more benefit than somebody that chose not to. Mm-hmm. And they didn't think that was totally fair.
Okay.
And I think for us, it was an effort by the current board, or the board at that time, to improve the benefit package that we were already offering. It was just an added feature for the staff that was there.
So more of a recruitment and retaining issue, like Michelle mentioned. Okay.
But, as I said, it was 14 years from the time we started the match until we actually made the switch. But we talked about it, at least once a year with the city council. So, the city councils roll over and get new. We would give them an annual update of where we are in the match and what's the switch to the 2% going to cost. So it didn't surprise any of the council when we actually got to the year and the moment in time when it was going to be a cost savings.
Yeah, that's good. So that kind of goes along with, and you kind of already touched on this, the communication that had to take place and the different groups that you had to communicate with. You had to communicate with your board, and there were no surprises once you got there. And that makes it a little easier for them to adopt something like it.
We all have employees that complain.
Surely not.
And some of those, I can literally count it on less than one hand, the number of employees that really complained of going to the 2% versus the deferred match. And almost to the point where if they wouldn't have complained, it would have been like, okay, what are we missing here?
Yeah. Right. So, okay, Rodney. So, the utilities elected to do the L6 in 2008. We all know what else happened in 2008.
Right. Shortly after, so in 2008, we were 105, 106% funded. We had a very well-funded plan. Another reason that made that change a little easier at that time was we were slightly overfunded. So, I think when Lager did the calculation, I'm sure it said hey, you're doing pretty well with your individual program, not too bad. We made that change, and then shortly after that, everyone knows the recession hit, the stock market tanked. And so in the combination of those two things, the change in plan and upgrading the plan and the stock market going down, we went from 105% funded to 53% funded in 2 years. I mean, it was, and a lot of that was contributed to the stock market. And so that was a huge shock to when we started getting our annual statements in June, July, that how fast we had gone down. And it was pretty shocking, and that was about the time I took over as general manager. So we hit that low point in 2010, and what we have done, again, that was quite shocking for us, but we weren't satisfied. We knew the stock market over time would recover, but what we chose to do at the utility was to make additional payments toward our unfunded accrued liability balance to help in that recovery. I think when Mr. Ashcroft talked, the average is about 80%. Well, we were at 53%. We felt we were not doing our job. We're not being responsible if we didn't do something to make up some of that difference and recover faster than normal.
Mm-hmm. And so is your goal to be 80% funded and then the additional contributions?
No, our goal is to be 100% funded.
100% funded.
Yeah,
okay.
Right now, with our additional contributions, and I thought we were making reasonable contributions, but we're actually making probably more than reasonable participation in that funding. We've gone from 53% funded in 2010, and in 2014 in our new statements we're at 90% funded. And so with the stock market coming up slowly, and we've been making pretty substantial contributions into that plan, we've been able to recover back to 90%. We expect we're going to continue that at least this year. And then next year, at some point, we're going to get to where we're either 100% funded or we're overfunded. And then I've been talking with loggers, folks, they will turn the tap off on us. Because they don't want us. It's okay to be a little overfunded, but they don't want it really overfunded. So.
Right.
And so they will turn us off here at some point in time.
And he brought up the stock market, and I think that's one reason that 2013 was the magical year for us, because 9, 10, 11, and 12 were good years in the stock market, and so our rate for loggers was dropping some. So I said earlier on, back in 2000, it was going to be $500,000, but now we did it for we did it for 140 some. But then the employees are putting in $260,000 a year too, in the 4%.
Right.
And I don't have the specific numbers, but the other thing happens when you go that underfunded is loggers, the contribution rate starts kicking in too, and it can only go up 1% a year, but we've gone from, I think we're probably paying in the 10-12% range for unemployed payroll. Just this last year, we're up to 16.1% that our contribution percentage was because we were in such bad shape. But in our last report, and with the improvements in the loggers' portfolio performance and what we've been doing, we've gone from 16.1, and our contribution rate has gone down to 12.1% again in just 1 year. But that's because we've getting to a funded status that makes us look a lot better and reduces that contribution rate.
Absolutely. So from an employee standpoint, how do you think the extra payments are going to ultimately benefit the employees of the utilities?
What we hope, and that's from my board and management, is that it shows our employees that we take their retirement planning and what we're doing as a company and funding their retirement, we take it pretty serious. We could have just let it languish at 53%, and the next year it'd be up a couple percent, and it would slowly recover. We became very proactive and very concerned, but we also want to have our staff know that we're taking it very seriously and funding it and bringing that funding percentage back up to where it should be or where we think it should be is really important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what sort of communications did you have that took place internally to kind of, I'm sure you had to sell it to your board to make additional payments that weren't required.
Right. We've got our board. It's an appointed board, so it's typically made up of business professionals in our community. So they have maybe a different perspective on how to operate the utility than, say, an elected council is. And that's nothing to say, nothing wrong with the councils, but with an appointed board, you tend to hand select the people you want on that board to run the utility in a certain way. And so when we presented them that our funding status had got to 53%, most of them, again with business backgrounds, were saying that's just not acceptable, and they took it pretty serious again to bring it back up. The other thing I think they would say is it was just a sound business practice. I mean, it's like we talked earlier, or the group, one of the panelists was talking earlier of one of the other sessions. You know, if you've got an $800 a month mortgage payment and you choose to pay $500, and you're just deferring that, you're really passing that on. Well, in case of mortgage, you're passing on to yourself for future, but you're falling behind and behind and behind. In this case, you know, we're taking that proactive stance, and we're actually making extra payments on a mortgage. And from my perspective, it feels good when you pay off your car. It feels good when you pay off your house. That's the same type of thing we're after is trying to make sure that we take care of business and get things done in an appropriate way. And we don't want our future ratepayers to be stuck with this. We don't want our employees, and again, they don't see a lot of the unfunded percentages and that kind of stuff, but we don't want them to get the feeling in a few years that why isn't the utility taking our retirement seriously? Why are they letting this languish like you might see in other states or other programs?
Right. So we had several employers in 2013 make additional payments. And you may get, Rodney, after this session, you may get questions from people in the room about, why you chose. So in your experience doing this, what recommendations would you give to other employers that were looking at doing this?
My initial response is going to be, you didn't get into the problem overnight, and we're not going to fix it overnight. That's what we say a lot of things at the utility is poles deteriorate over time, and you aren't going to fix all your poles overnight. In this case, we did get into this problem literally almost overnight. Within 2 years, we dropped pretty fast. But you need to take a more steady approach to the recovery. You need to think about, how is Loggers going to perform, and their performance on our investments have been outstanding. So we're confident that between the stock market recovering, the performance of Loggers, and making these additional contributions, our goal was not to recover in 2 years, but our goal was probably to recover in 5 to 10 years. And so we looked at that unfunded balance. My board is pretty conservative at the moment, and so they were not willing to, hey, let's just write a check for the difference. They said, let's just deal with this over time. But it's something, too, that we didn't want to say, okay, let's try and take care of this over 20 years. I mean, it was we want to take care of it, while our cash flow is good, those things, and be responsible and like I said, good stewards of our money.
Right. Okay, great. Are there any questions so far? No? Okay.
No.
All right, so this is kind of a question I'm going to ask with both of you, all right? And you both can answer it. What is one of the biggest challenges each of you faces as the leader of a local government agency? Bill?
Personnel.
Personnel?
Yeah.
And in what way?
I did not take child development in college.
Okay.
It should be a required course.
Okay. All right, I understand. Michelle, was that an approved comment by you? Okay. All right, Rodney, what would you say to that question?
Well, I wasn't going there. For us, it's as a locally run utility, and we just do the water and electric services in Rolla, is we're constantly looking at how are we stretching our personnel to do more things, wearing more hats, those kinds of things. And even with doing that, our costs continue to escalate. The cost of purchasing power, the cost of getting water out of the ground continue to escalate. And so it's trying to do, like I said, look at our equipment, look at our funds, look at how we do things, and trying to be as efficient as we can to try and keep the rates as low as we can for our customers. And we're no different than any other city department where we are trying to provide the best services to our customers at the lowest cost. And so what our constant struggle is trying to provide those good services and keep our rates as low as we can.
And we have utilities, and in Fulton, our utilities are doing very well. I mean, we have natural gas too, and the wholesale price of natural gas is down a lot. But the general fund is incredibly tight on revenues. And the expenditures seem to keep going up, and the revenues have just been incredibly flat for 4 and 5 years. Just no growth. We're having some pretty serious sales tax growth this year, but that's the first time that's been up to get excited about in several. But if I could find a way to get more money in the general fund, it would make those departments a lot happier. So, I don't want to give. So what we end up doing is the utilities, the electric, water, sewer, gas, and solid waste, they buy because they have the revenues. We often have them buy some new equipment, and then 2 or 3 years later, they pass it down to the general fund. Well, believe it or not, the general fund's thrilled to have it, even though it's might be a 4 or 5 year old backhoe or a 6-year-old dump truck. They're thrilled to have it because we don't have the money to buy them a new one. And utilities understand. We kind of, our motto is we're a city of one, and even though it may be electric fund money, it really takes care of everybody. Like this year, one of the best things the city of Fulton has done in years is we built a splash pad, also known as a spray ground. Well, we had put $150,000 in the general fund budget for Parks and Rec, but when we got the bids back, if we included a filtration system and a chlorination system so that we would recirculate the water, the cost was going to be about $250,000.
What's a splash pad? I'm sorry.
Spray ground where the water squirts all over and kids run through it. And,
Okay.
and it's free, no charge to get in, but the cost was going to be about $250,000. Or we were going to just use the water once and dump it straight to the creek. But we figured out that was going to be about 500,000 gallons a day, a lot of water. So I just went to the utility superintendent and said, I need 100,000, or we're going to dump 500,000 gallons of your water a day, and you're not going to get a dime for it. And he goes, here, okay, you can have 100. And I said, and for that, we'll give you naming rights. We'll call it the Fulton Waterworks. So he said, oh, it's more than you usually give me. So we have it's an absolute wonderful addition to the community.
And I think that, in this, like I said, I think utilities tend to do well over time. We have downturns as well, but yeah, city government general funds are, in the city of Raleigh, as an example, same thing. Sales tax have been incredibly flat, and that's a very difficult thing for our city governments to face. And it's been that way for, like I said, since 2008, 09.
It went down in 08 and really hasn't recovered until this year.
So what's one of the most rewarding aspects of serving your communities individually?
Being able to take care of the citizens. Being able to say yes, we can do that. Because even a lot of times people call and they ask for something, and I've been accused of being a little blunt. If the answer's no, I say no, because I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste my time. But but when they call and they have a request and you're able to say yes and you're able to follow up and kind of allow them to pat you on the back a little bit and say that you did good, and then you invite them to the council meeting and say, don't tell me, tell the council. But that's real rewarding.
Great. And probably along those same lines is when we get phone calls that say the tree trimmers were in my backyard and they did a good job, and we get compliments on the services that our crews are doing. That's really good. And this isn't my line. It came from Bob at Carthage, and I know he's not. I don't believe he's here, but Susan, they're over here. Bob Williams is the director or the general manager of Carthage Water and Light, and with investor-owned utilities like in Ameren, their offices are in St. Louis in far off places. But we're very local, and we go to, our kids go to the same schools, that kind of stuff. So Bob's comment is we look our regulators in the eye every day, and I think whether it's city government or the utility government, that's the case all the time. We're running into our customers everywhere. If someone comes into a city office or the utility office, they're usually one door away or two doors away from being in either the administrator's office or the manager's office. If they got a problem, you're going to take all the phone calls. You don't get to not take a phone call or not return a call. So you're talking to your constituents all the time. You're seeing them all the time, and so there's the good comes with that. The bad comes with it too. But you're able to take those calls from someone that, like I say, going back to tree trimming. I had a call recently. Someone that had a tree in their backyard, close to the power lines. Want to know if someone can come and take a look at that and possibly take it down because it's proximity to the lines, and that's something we will do, and we're happy to do it if it makes sense for the customer and makes sense for us. So, and whether it's responding to outages in the middle of the night, that kind of stuff, that's the rewarding part of what we do.
Great. So you both have talked about the advantages of having the 2% program as far as mainly recruiting and retaining quality employees. And obviously having quality workers filters down to the community. If you have quality employees, that's going to increase the quality of services ultimately for the taxpayers and the ratepayers and that sort of thing. But a lot of folks in your communities don't have a 2% multiplier, don't have a pension. So what would you say to a ratepayer or a taxpayer that came into your office and didn't like the fact that you had a 2% plan or a pension at all because they didn't have one? Or what about someone from the media? How would you defend the loggers plan that you have for your employees?
We need to keep the employees that we have in order to maintain the level of service that citizen has grown to be accustomed to. And if we didn't have these employees, we'd be training new ones, and the quality of the service would decrease.
It takes a long time for our crews to, whether it's a water crew learning and it's not just where the water mains are. We know they're in the ground. That's another district told me that one time. I asked them where their water mains are for locates, and I said, well, they're in the ground. But it takes a long time for that water crew not only to learn where specifically the water mains are in every street. It's which water mains are prone to water breaks, which ones do we need to have on a 5-year capital improvement plan to replace. Same with our power lines. Where are the neighborhoods that need tree trimming? Where are the neighborhoods that have poles that have deteriorated? We need to go in and rebuild the system. It takes a long time to develop the skills, or for our employees to develop not only the skills that they have to work on lines energized, to do water main breaks, but to do it safely and to know the system well enough so that when we have an outage, they can respond, and not only respond, but they're not looking around saying, well, wonder where the problem is. They're actually out doing the work and taking care of stuff. So, we're serving our citizens every day, and as the example that we had up on the screen not so long ago, it talked about the 80%, having 80% is kind of what the retirees or planners say we should have. And in the example, this employee maybe only had 38%. Well, having a modest guaranteed income for providing our citizens the services they need, I don't think that's too much to ask. And it's not like the pension system is, the other example was someone that worked 50 years, they're going to have 100%. Well, that's pretty rare air to be in, to have that kind of service. Most of our employees are probably retiring with anywhere from 30 to 35, 40 years experience. Well, they're not going to have 80% income replacement. It's a more modest type income. So I don't think having that expectation that we provide that for our employees who have provided services to the citizens for that length of time is too much to ask.
Great. That's all the questions I had on my little sheet. So unless anyone else has any questions at this point. Anybody have questions? All right. We are running, it looks like about 15 minutes early. So what we're going to do is we're just going to keep running early. And we'll have Brian Collette. You've already heard from him. He's our CIO, Chief Investment Officer. He's going to give the investment performance report. And as far as I know, it's all good news. So,
and certainly, if anyone has questions afterwards and they want to come up and ask us questions of how much we're contributing or what was the best approaches, we'll certainly be able to try and answer out your questions.
Or ask Michelle. A lot of my information came from her anyway, so.
Wonderful.
Let's thank both these gentlemen for taking time out of their schedule to do this today.